Now, we're going to move on at pace to the world of the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. Now, don't worry, I'm not talking about our next guests. I'm talking about robotics and why we would use a robot in the first place. So to help us understand the cutting edge and the art of what's possible, why don't we welcome up our next guests, and I'll introduce them to you. Very much looking forward to seeing them. Lee, Eva, and Ravindra, welcome to EnergyTech Annual. Very good to see everybody. Been looking forward to this one, I must say. Let me introduce you each in turn. This is Lee Wilson of Honorworks, Eva Magnisali of Dataform Lab, and Ravindra Chunilal of Sellafield. Greetings to all of you. Lee, let's start with you. Honorworks, you're taking us under the sea surface.
Is that a £5 fine, Ollie?
It is. Save for Children will be grateful.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Honorworks, we're an Aberdeen-based startup, and we're developing new models for operating robots subsea, something that's been done for 20 to 30 years offshore. Maybe not a lot of people know about it, but the models, they're in need of a change. Like we talked about business model in the last discussion. To really scale that further, we need to change how we deploy and operate these vehicles.
Now, so I think we're looking at a slide of that right now. I can see what looks like a submarine, but I could also see something on the end of an umbilical cord off the side. So what am I looking at here on the slides tab?
So what you're looking at, the robot that's on the end of the tether, if you like, is a conventional subsea, what we call a work-class ROV, remotely operated vehicle. Now, typically, that would be deployed from a vessel on the surface, offshore in the field, with lots of people on board, and that vessel would be diesel-powered. It would be emitting quite a lot of carbon and costing quite a lot of money to have there. We deploy these robots to inspect infrastructure, to inspect assets, to maintain or repair assets. And that is increasingly important because we're going to need to work at sea and subsea a lot more in the future. So oil and gas has been working offshore for, as I said, 30, 40 years. Now we have offshore wind in emerging blue economy sectors who will need to work subsea with an economic footprint and an economic model and sustainable and scalable way. So what we've devised is a solution to the problem of the cost and carbon footprint of these vessels, and what we call as a submersible mothership, no emissions. It's fully electric. It is commissioned and sent off from the harbour. It transits to the work site completely under the sea. It deploys the subsea robot to do the work that the conventional vehicle would have done. It's controlled and supervised from the beach, and when it's done, it pops back in and transits back to the harbour and awaits its next instruction.
Fascinating. Goodness me. Thank you, Lee. So, and just remind us, so who is your client in that instance then? Is that governments, private companies?
Well, it depends. There's a range of different value chains that apply with this type of model, but typically it will be those companies that are looking to maintain and inspect subsea assets. So the asset owners might be the offshore wind operators or the offshore oil companies. They'll typically have a service company that contract this type of equipment to then do the oil.
Yeah. And just to be crystal clear, we're going to meet the team in a second, but just to be crystal clear, what that particular robot is doing in the image that you've painted for us or shown us is inspection to check for damage, for disrepair, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. So as part of an ongoing commitment, when you put something on the seabed, you have to inspect it regularly. It's a very harsh environment. It's an extreme environment. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of corrosion. So you have to check for degradation to your assets and potentially damage from external factors like fishing. Like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Thank you for bringing that to life. Eva, let's have a chat with you. Dataform Lab, you're working with the notoriously glamorous construction industry. Tell us a bit more.
Hi, Ollie. Yes, that's true. Dataform Lab is a startup within the construction industry. And what we're trying to do is to accelerate the introduction and the integration of automation, mainly in offsite construction. So we are trying to tackle this problem from multiple points of view. First, by creating digital workflows that can enable all stakeholders to access and use automation, either robotic programming or robotic manufacturing. And we remove all the complexity that is embedded in all this process of robotic programming. But we also work at the business level, providing automation consultancy, so that the integration of advanced fabrication technologies is not just another technology trend, but it's led by business decisions, and it can actually help bring automation and construction through a very structured business model.
Yeah. So in very simple terms, Eva, you're helping construction companies understand robotics and automation in context. Are you actually helping them build the robots too, or is that done by someone else and you're just putting out a plan?
So the robotic equipment, most of it already exists. You can see an example just behind me. It's industrial robotic arms that have been used and revolutionized manufacturing for many years now. It's not new technology in that sense. The innovation is at the part where we connect design to manufacturing. So we are streamlining design and translating it into robotic code for the machine.
Got it. That looks terrifying behind you. It looks like it's going into your ear. What is that? What is that?
It's an industrial robotic arm. It's a very flexible machine, actually. It's just a robotic arm that whatever you put at the end of it as a tool, that's the process that it performs. And that's another benefit of using this kind of machinery, that it's quite flexible, so you can customize the process of manufacturing very easily.
Yeah. There you go. It's just a regular robotic arm. There you go. I don't know. I've not got one in my background. Now, how about Rav from Sellafield? Thank you so much for joining us. Just remind me, Sellafield, Rav, Europe's largest nuclear site, but actually what you're doing now is a very different type of operation.
Hi, Ollie. Yes, so we're now transitioning from what was, mainstream operations into a different type of operation. We're transitioning into decommissioning, nuclear decommissioning, and yes, it's a huge sort of program that we've got. Those who have sort of looked at what Sellafield does online will see this quite clearly. It's 100 years plus. Currently as it's set out, and we've recognised that robotics, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems got a huge role to play in delivering that mission going forward for us. It's new, it's challenging. We've got challenges that no one else has ever sort of tackled before globally, and that's also due to the nature of some of the facilities that we've got as well. So when you talked about dark, dirty, dangerous environments, absolutely, those are what we've got on our sites that we want to get into in the safest possible way, and protect our workforce at the same time. So ultimately it's about how we can deliver that nuclear decommissioning mission at pace, improve safety, a better environmental impact, using these sort of systems. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, you talk about dark and dirty and dangerous, but you seem to have added another D. It looks a bit like a dog that I can see in an image. I hope our audience can see that tuning in. What are we looking at?
So that's almost standard off the shelf. It's made by Boston Dynamics. It's called Spot. They've given it a name, Spot, the robotic dog. And what we've got there, image of what we've recently trialed on the site, which is to send this quadruped into an environment, a radioactive environment, to do a bit of a scan of what is that environment like, where are the sort of challenges for us, are there any sort of unknowns that we need to be aware of before we go in there and start decommissioning. But what it has done is protected our workforce by not going into that challenging environment, it doing the work for us. It's a great bit of kit. We've been working collaboratively with our supply chain and other partners to develop this. And what you might see on it is what we've made some PPE for it as well, a protective gear, so that when it does come out of a radioactive environment, it's very easily decontaminated, and it can be moved yet into another environment, so it can be reused.
Fascinating. Protective pet equipment. Right. Thank you, Rob. What a fascinating job you've all got. Let's bring you all back together, because but before we dig into the cutting edge of what's possible, Lee, do you think there are any misconceptions when people start to talk about robotics?
I think there are a few. First of all, the most popular misconception is they all look like the Terminator or Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1990s. As we've seen there, they look vastly different. Whether they're industrial robots, whether they're robot dogs, or they're swimming robots under the sea. I think that's one of the most common.
Yeah, interesting. Eva, forgive me. Carry on, Lee.
No, that's it. I think that was the main one. People, when I present the swimming vehicle, they wouldn't even think it's a robot. It's something, a submarine. There's people inside it, and that's one of the common questions we've got: is where does the driver sit?
Right, that's interesting. So Eva, I mean, my question about misconception is not as light-hearted as it seems, because actually education has to be part of your mission.
Yes, that's true. It's a really important part of our mission to demystify what robotics means for construction, especially because, as Lee mentioned, there are many different robots. People think of androids just moving plasterboards on a construction site when they think of industrial robotics. But there is also a big misconception within the construction industry about when to introduce automation. So I totally disagree with bringing automation just at the very end, just to solve a problem, just like to have a robot laying bricks. It has to be embedded in the design thinking since the very beginning of a project.
And presumably, we hear a lot about the idea of a sort of just transition, bringing in automation, because of course what might be at stake is humans and jobs.
Well, it actually, the introduction of automation creates different kinds of jobs. It's removing some jobs that are very dangerous, like welding or working on height. But there are very many misconceptions. Everybody, when they hear robotics and automation, they think that everybody's losing their jobs. That's true.
No, absolutely. We've got to break down some of those misconceptions, if that's what they are. Rav, we've got so much that I want to get through. We've got some questions that I'm inviting from our audience. Help me understand the intersection of robotics and artificial intelligence, because your role spans the two.
Yeah, so robots, just a bit of metal equipment, and to work in a way which is going to be value add. That's where the software then sort of sits behind it. With what is the task that needs to be undertaken. Almost teach it, and then let and then at a certain point you then allow the computer to understand using the software and the algorithms about how that can be automated, to start doing those sort of repetitive tasks, understanding what the environment is, what is possible, what isn't possible, and then also taking it that step further and working with other technologies and sensors that are out there and merging them together, so you've got a better understanding of the wider environment, so it can work as a full system. And I think that is one of the greatest challenges that I think not just ourselves, but the industry is sort of faces in terms of how do you start linking this together, how do you start creating some of these standards as well, so you can have more plug and play systems, so everything starts working and talking to each other.
And what's an example, Rav, of how AI is already deployed in some of what you're doing in Sellafield?
So we're using AI, not as much as we'd like to, in all honesty. But what we have started to do is embrace it in some of our UAVs. So the UAVs do inspections at height, not something which would have been done typically using, scaffolders to put that up. But what it has done is improve the rate at which we can get that onto our sites. It can do inspections today, it can do inspection, in a week or a month down the line, and then into the future. And what the AI will allow us to do is understand, what changes have happened, where are defects that we struggle to sort of pick up, and then help improve, make a decision on the back of that.
Yeah, and just remind us, Rav, UAVs in that context, what's that standing for?
So basically drones.
Yeah. And what about, you must have heard this a million times, Rav, but security? When I see Spot the dog roaming around a nuclear decommissioning site, susceptibility to being hacked, having a new owner.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety, security, absolutely top of our agenda when it comes to these sort of like wireless technologies and devices. So we work with we work with our security teams that we've got on our sites. We also work with our regulators as well, and others in the supply chain who are helping continuously develop and evolve something which is continuously moving. So it's just keeping it as safe as possible. But one of the key elements for us is that we've got a fail-safe option when it comes to any of these sort of technologies, such that in the event something was to happen, it would, we can then take back control, or it would fail in a safe manner.
Yes. I see. Can take back control. I can hear our politicians coming down in their busy vests as I speak. Right, got some questions coming in. I'm going to put those to you. Eva, here's one for you from Philip. Thank you, Philip, who I see as a retired physics teacher, as it happens. What involvement does Eva have in 3D printing within the construction industry, especially where houses are now being printed in 5 to 7 days? Is that really happening?
So that's true. 3D printing is a big topic at the moment, concrete 3D printing and large-scale 3D printing. We have worked with different companies, both to investigate the available technologies, but again, our job at Dataform Lab is not to reinvent the wheel. We work mostly with architectural practices and designers to make sure that we form and they form a very solid business plan. So what we see a lot in construction is that there are R&D projects that they are a one-off. So one pavilion is being constructed, one sample of a building, and then everything dissolves, because construction is so fragmented that this knowledge is very easily lost from one project to the next. So we have been working with several practices to make sure that 3D printing in construction can become an actual business model that will bring revenue to this company.
Yes. No, got it. Because Lee, you've had to do this, haven't you? I mean, to get where you've had to raise funding, you've had to deal with some massive corporations. How have you done that?
This is, we're in a conservative industry, there's no doubt about that. I think one of the benefits we've had is that we have been using this robotic technology for a long time because it was an enabling technology. So in the 70s and early 80s, a lot of field developments were done by human divers, a lot of the sort of installation work or the maintenance work. But as we discovered reserves in deeper water, we were in depths where a human simply couldn't go. We needed another tool. So we have history of being able to deploy robots in the sector and use them. The problem has been we got into then a very stable business model, using the vessels, using the big crews offshore, and that's no longer sustainable. So the challenge we have now is not necessarily disrupting the technology. A lot of it is there, it's available to us. It's about disrupting the business model. And maybe addressing, not maybe, definitely addressing some of the concerns Rav highlighted around security. It's not just about a nefarious actor getting control of your vehicle. It's about it doing something unexpected. It's about it not getting the result or acquiring the data you asked it to do. So.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Rav to sort of gaze into sort of what could become possible. But Lee, while I've got you, there's quite a bit that you could argue stands against you and Eva, because you're relatively small companies, relatively early stage. You haven't got access to the millions and billions that some of the larger firms have. Except I think you're going to see that you have certain advantages. What are they?
Well, I think the first one is that we don't have an incumbent business to protect. One of the challenges I've seen in our industry has been, and I'm talking from experience and some lessons learned, was it was difficult for some of the bigger or more incumbent players to disrupt their own businesses, even if they had the means to do so and the technology to do so. So I think we have that as an advantage. But as you say, we do have the challenge that we maybe don't have access to existing contracts through which to deploy and evaluate technology. We need partnerships.
Yeah, no, got it. I can see Eva nodding with a steely gleam in her eye. Eva, what's your secret weapon?
Yes, it's similar to what Lee said. Bigger companies have like very established business models that they work on in construction, so they are not as flexible to innovation and change, whereas a startup like Dataform Lab has more agility. But yes, I believe that the key in this case is interdisciplinary collaboration as an advantage, because creating partnerships within this industry is really crucial.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad you've said that, because Rav, you sit in a particular physical location, Sellafield. What opportunities do you see if we sort of zoom right out across the piece for the future of robotics? Help me to draw some of these threads together.
So I think there's several that have been mentioned, already. So one is around, creating opportunities, for SMEs to, small SMEs, who are agile to be able to get involved and take some of their ideas from concept through to completion as well. And we've got to create the environment to allow that to happen across the piece. So when I look at Sellafield, it's a big site. If I zoom out further across the UK, there's several nuclear sites across the UK which face similar sort of challenges. So how we draw the thread together to allow SMEs to develop and function, not just on our site, but also on the other nuclear sites across the UK, but then also with the opportunity to then sell some of those services globally. I think.
So Rav, how have you got your head round interacting with the punchy startup? Are you investing in them? Are you incubating what does that interface look like?
Yeah, really, really, really good question there, Ollie. So, I'd say we're really at the start of that journey, recognizing that collaboration is the key, to sort of making this happen. We want to be transparent about the challenges that we've got, on our site, and then share that with, the academics and the supply chain, to be able to engage, but also taking learning from other sectors at the same time. So something that we're kicking off right now, so it's very close to the Eagle Labs in Whitehaven, is a facility called RACO 1. So RACO stands for Robotics and AI Collaboration. And what we're doing there is taking a series of projects, that's going to support the nuclear decommissioning challenge that we're working on with academics and the supply chain all under one roof, to be able to share that understanding, share that learning, and look at how we take that forward. We can then help accelerate the delivery of, getting robotics onto our sites. We can get the processes right, get the right people involved at all stages, including our regulators. It's absolutely key.
Yeah, brilliant. RACO 1, I can see Robert Downey Jr.'s phone ringing as you say those words. That sounds epic. Here's a question for you, Lee. Do you foresee the uptake of autonomous underwater vehicles instead of inspection, repair and maintenance vessels being a smooth, easy transition, or do you expect a lot of pushback from the operators who refuse to adopt such technology? So just to say again, the uptake, so we're moving from autonomous underwater vehicles to inspection, repair and maintenance. First of all, Lee, what's the question you're talking about?
So he's asking about the barriers to adoption of these autonomous underwater vehicles, the robotic vehicles themselves. What are the barriers to the scale uptake in those systems versus the conventional historical vessel with lots of people on board and big heavy diesel engines? I think I do not expect an easy transition because we have been trying as an industry to move in this direction probably for a decade or so now, and there have been some great efforts at that. The trouble we've always had is the new generation of robots have still had an element of dependency on a vessel. We still needed a vessel to launch them and supervise them because we didn't quite trust them, and then update them with their position and then catch them at the end. So you still had this vessel in the field, and it eroded the value proposition, and it lessened the incentive to make that big leap, that switch. You say, well, if I've got a vessel there, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it, and that's safer and that's less risky. So I think that has been the challenge, but I see those barriers coming down now because there's technology there that can push these vehicles into the field without the conventional vessel. And when the first service company or when the first operator does that, everyone will have to catch up.
Yeah. So I've got just a couple of final questions. We've just a few minutes remaining. Eva, somebody tuned in thinking we are within a very large construction company. We cannot afford to miss the potential of robotics. Give us, apart from calling your company today, give us a really blunt piece of advice to keep us up to speed.
I think changing the mentality of working on a day-to-day basis is really important. We need digital innovation in every aspect of construction. And as I said before, it's not just about thinking of robotics as a solution to a single manufacturing problem. It's about optimizing design for manufacturing, thinking about automation since the very beginning. So having an overall mentality shift is really important. And then like the integration of the technology can follow once the business plan is put in place.
Yeah. So, Rav, listening to our entrepreneurs, how do you think this is going to play out? Because Lee is doing robotics underwater. Eva is doing robotics in construction and many other things. Are we going to see these verticals continue, or do you sense a sort of cross-sector opportunity here?
Both, I think. I think Lee mentioned, right at the start, robotics has been used, since from the 1970s going forward, and we already have robotics, on our site, and we see it as a growing field. Other sectors have embraced it, and it's a huge opportunity, to start collaborating with other sectors, cross-sector collaboration, to take, what might be a challenge in one environment could be very similar, in another environment. It just needs recognising. It requires us pulling those together, when you look at it from a national perspective, UK government's already recognised as part of its innovation strategy that robotics, autonomous systems, and AI, one of just a handful are going to be the growing sectors in the future, for us nationally. So, yes.
No, thank you, Rav. So, and just very briefly, final comment from each of you, Lee and Eva, a glimpse about the future of your companies. Lee, I shouldn't say you're going to stay underwater. That sounds like an insult, but you know what I mean.
We're definitely going to focus on underwater. The future for our company is we've built the established way to deploy these vehicles, and it makes sense to do it no other way in the future.
Got it. Eva, how about you? A future beyond construction?
I believe we want to play a really important role in bridging designers and manufacturers, creating the workflows that will create a common language between the two.
Interesting. Watch this space. No, thank you, Eva and Lee. And Rav, I was only sorry not to see Spot the dog appearing in the background of your shot, but maybe next time. Send him my best. For now, Rav, Lee and Eva, thank you very much for joining me.